The Mar-a-lago Accord is the hypothetical code name for a project that both Trumpian economists and outside observers are following closely. It is bound to be an ambitious new direction for the international economic equilibrium and certain to affect the following 4 years, for good or for ill. If it succeeds, it'll lead to the highest point ever seen by the American dollar, followed by a slow and constant decline, by design of the USA and in accordance with the rest of the world. If we look at the last half-century, the dollar was able to bounce back in the 1970s thanks to the Federal Reserve Bank of Paul Volcker. Staggering interest rates at the time tamed inflation and attracted capital to the USA. Between 1980 and 1985, the dollar appreciated by 50% against European currencies and the yen. Wall Street began its epic rise, but the revaluation of the dollar created significant problems for the industry and pushed the American trade deficit to 3.5% of GDP. After years of liberalism in exchange rate matters, on September 22, 1985, the Reagan administration intervened and signed an agreement with France, the United Kingdom, West Germany, Canada, and Japan. The message to the markets was clear: the dollar had to return to earth. And indeed, the dollar fell until, at the end of that decade, exchange rates were back to 1980 levels. And this is precisely when the financial press of the time started to talk about American deindustrialization. Production moved to Asia, while only general management, marketing, and research and development remained in the USA. It was the start of globalization, seen positively as a way to lower costs and raise efficiency. A blessing for enterprise, a boon for American consumers. Globalization in the 90s bridged the gap between the neoliberalism of the 80s and the triumph of markets in the new millennium. This success promised stability and well-being, without blood nor tears, without cold wars nor direct conflict. It was supposed to be the best of all possible worlds, the highest point of human evolution, the end of history. It wasn't. I am Guido Brera, and you're listening to Black Box, The Hidden Side of Finance, a podcast by Cora Media, sponsored by Docebo. The end of the 20th century sees a paradigm shift that lasts to this day. A radical shift based on political choices. Just 49 days before the start of the new millennium, the Clinton administration abrogates an essential law in American economics and a symbol of its past. November 12, 1999, sees the Glass-Steagall Act revoked. This law from 1933 was put into place in order to regulate the American banking system, and thus avoid another crash like that of '29. For the rest of the century, the Glass-Steagall Act kept commercial and investment banks clearly separated, which in turn kept at bay all fears of a new Great Depression. Commercial banks would take care of deposits and give out loans and mortgages to people and companies. On the other hand, investment banks would assist companies, businesses, as well as public and financial institutions by managing company listings on the stock exchange and developing stocks, bonds, as well as derivatives. With this law in place, the failure of one bank couldn't affect the general public, and in turn the real economy. But as the century closes, a new world opens up to the world of finance. Like a nuclear reaction, the nuclei are brought together and the chemical energy overcomes the so-called repulsion barrier. Investment banks use financial engineering to pair their clients' savings and the liquidity of companies. The resulting nuclear reaction brings with it both tremendous strengths and dangers. Commercial and investment banks merge into those giants that Alan Greenspan, chairman of the Federal Reserve, calls too big to fail. The wealth of American citizens can suddenly be injected into the financial markets. The resulting amount of liquidity is unheard of, like a sudden flood gushing down a riverbed, just as spectacular and just as violent. With the elimination of the Glass-Steagall Act, the sheer volume of money taken from American bank accounts is about to revitalize the entire financial world and flip it on its head. The following sequence of events is fast and straightforward. Interest rates are lowered in support of business. Money is cheap, loans are easy, money circulates, and heads start spinning. Everyone is told that they can take out a bank loan and buy a house, even those without any guarantees. A dream appears on the horizon. Every American will finally have their own home. It's the dream of every democracy in the world. Banks have so much capital that they'll give out mortgages to anyone. Meanwhile, a new millennium has begun, and globalization is racing along. The world is suddenly much smaller. The Western world is optimistic. The future is looking bright. Dreams are finally coming true. It's a new age for the global order. The sun is shining and the sky is clear. Globalization, financialization, and deflation are tracing the line of a new dream. But that's all it is, of course, a dream. The USA, the West, and the whole world are about to be stirred from their reverie. The blue sky suddenly darkens, a threat looming over all stock exchanges, and on the financial districts of 5 continents, and on the real economy, on everyone's lives. 20 years have now passed from that rude awakening, and the pillars upholding that model from the 80s have crumbled. American industry shows the signs of the damage it's incurred. The fields of innovation are holding fast, but all others are in serious danger. Politics is on shaky legs. It's weak and disoriented. Donald Trump becomes president in 2016 by calling out deindustrialization. The following Biden government actually props the country back up, but at the cost of high inflation, which Trump takes advantage of to win the elections again, promising reindustrialization. It's now clear that lower taxes for businesses and less state control over markets won't solve the crisis. One way could be to devalue the dollar, but that would require approval by the Federal Reserve and could still be neutralized by a flood of European and Asian currencies. The other path is to resort to tariffs, which would strengthen the dollar. Trump doesn't need approval from the Fed or Congress for this, and the tariffs would guarantee tax revenues. But who would pay the brunt of said tariffs? The Democrats have no doubt that it would be the American consumer. But not according to Scott Bessent, an important economic advisor for Trump, and administrator of the Key Square Group Fund, for whom the costs will befall European and Asian exporters, and the rest would be covered by the new strength of the dollar. Bessent is the main candidate for Secretary of the Treasury in the coming Trump administration, and his theory is that tariffs will pressure other countries to make concessions. Europe will increase military spending, China will invest in American industry, and all countries will adjust exchange rates in favor of the American dollar. That is, of course, if they don't want to see the tariffs get worse. Trump's economists also have other schools of thought. Not everyone sees tariffs as just a temporary measure to be used as a bargaining chip on the international stage. Robert Lighthizer, trade representative for the first Trump administration, wants the tariffs to become permanent, a sort of financial wall around the USA. Zoltan Pozsar, the audacious and visionary market guru, believes that they can pressure China to choose between heavy tariffs and the purchase of 100-year U.S. Treasury bonds in a collateral deposit. In every case, Trump's economists want to reduce imports in the USA drastically. No more buying from abroad. Some are even in favor of taxing foreign financial investments, discouraging the influx of foreign capital and bringing the dollar down. What we know for certain is that Trump wants both a strong industry and a strong economy, and his second government is going to attempt to radically shift the model of the last few decades, in the USA and on the global stage. We've seen it before. Canceling just one law in 1999 led to unbridled financial activity that subverted the real economy. And in a similar manner, the next policy choices of the American government, in a moment of global tension like today, are going to severely affect human life on our planet. Black Box is a Cora News podcast, produced by Cora Media and sponsored by Docebo. Written by Guido Brera with I Diavoli. Editorial supervision by Francesca Milano. Intro and sound design by Luca Micheli. Editing and post-production by Luca Micheli and Mattia Liciotti. Production organization by Alex Pederengo.